Greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. Now we're coming to another episode that's usually on my skip list. And having watched through it again, that opinion has not changed. Like a lot of the other episodes, it's usually one that when I marathon watch the show on the box set or on the streaming services like I'm watching it on Peacock right now, I've always usually just skipped it. Watched it a couple times. I think I even caught it once in syndication because I remember being a little surprised when I saw the opening bit and I'm like, okay, that makes that moment make a little bit more sense. Well, my opinion on it still hasn't changed. And I put this episode in the category of episodes that are technically good, like the acting's fine, the writing's fine, has some funny moments, but just as a whole, it's just that doesn't click with me. It's not a hidden gem like Fascinating Deborah. It's not one that I can see myself watching, depending on my mood, like The Babysitter. It's one that, unless I have to watch it again for some reason, I am just going to skip it. And that, of course, is Big Shots. The teleplay was written by Jason Gellis and Mark Hunkham, who worked on the episodes Cousin Gerard and Net Worth, which those are the only 3 episodes they worked on, so... Another episode I usually skip in Gerard, and Net Worth is one I really do like. I'll talk about that one when we get to there. I believe that's season 5, if I'm remembering my order of episodes correctly. The pair also worked on the Ellen DeGeneres show for many years. That's the talk show one and not the sitcom. So the pair did move on to some bigger and better things, depending on your point of view. This is a Ray and Robert-centric episode, which is where most of the humor comes from, but it is also where some of the problems come from. There's better episodes featuring them. I mean, Brothers comes to mind, but there's also worse ones, like Raybert, but we'll cover that one once we get to season 6. I don't keep bringing that one up, but there's one major thing in there that I'm going to really rant on when we get there. Now, the plot of this episode is that Robert wants to go to Cooperstown to visit the Baseball Hall of Fame, but this isn't any ordinary visit where he could go any day of the week and be like, oh, look at that, tink, look at that, tink. Nope. Cooperstown is honoring the 1969 Mets, the Miracle Mets. And since we all know that Robert is a big Art Shamsky fan, of course he wants to go. He wants to see his hero. I'm going to tell him I named my dog after him, he says at one point. Now, Ray, in his Ray way, does not want to go at first, but eventually off screen he is talked into it. Now, what makes this opening scene a little funny is that Robert is trying to play it off nonchalant, even though both Frank and Marie have spilled the beans that they're trying to ask Ray to take him. And that's where Ray comes in and says he doesn't want to go. The look on Ray's face while he's watching Robert try to play it off nonchalantly, that it's to the point that even if Ray did not know at that moment why Robert was doing that and acting that way, he would probably be able to tell, like, Robert wants something. He's never usually this jovial and this when he's coming in here unless he has news or he wants something. So him coming in and doing this is the big flag. The other little funny thing in here that also has me just tilting my head a little bit is that of all the sports, Deborah has an issue with boxing, which I can kind of get. I mean, it's boxing. It's essentially fighting, but it's sanctioned. But it's like, really? You're going to pull the kids out when they're watching boxing? Hey, as long as they're told that this is a sport, and as long as you don't go beyond this and don't actually beat the crap out of someone in real life unless you're defending yourself, there's nothing wrong. It's just another example, I think, of Deborah going a little bit too far in the opposite direction from the rest of the Barones at times. I mean, there are times where the Barones go far the other way from her. That's where it's like the balanced approach. Well, Robert and Ray, they go to Cooperstown. We get to see them on the drive there and on the drive back. And it is a seemingly normal trip at first, but the big drama of the center part of the episode comes when instead of waiting in line, Ray walks around the line to see the front, talks to security, and finds out it's a 3-hour wait. Robert is all fine to wait in line, even though you can tell he's kind of annoyed that they didn't leave earlier. I mean, it's a 4-hour drive from Limbrook to Cooperstown, according to dialogue, so you would think that for that you'd want to get out there early. I know me personally, if I was going there to wait in line for something, I would want to leave ideally at the crack of dawn, if no later, maybe like 7 in the morning. But the only comparable drive that I usually do is the drive from here to Vegas, which is about the same time wise, unless you hit traffic. So I can understand Ray's frustration a little bit there. But the part that has me shake my head comes when Ray tries to pull the I'm Ray Barone with New York Newsday card. And you can tell his entitlement is oozing out. He's trying to get around security, trying to get up there, trying to cut in line. He keeps getting called out. He has a guy in line call him out like, no cuts. Security keeps trying to tell him to go. He even goes up to talk to Tugboat. And Tugboat's like, he's nobody. Beat it, Barone. Which is chuckle-worthy. And then the look on the security officer's face when Ray comes over to him, he's like... Now, in this scene, I'm siding with the security officer. I know somebody's going to say, well, you work security, so you have a bias. Yeah. I have a bias. Because I've seen people like this. Both of my security jobs. And it's one of those things that, like, if you're told by security that this is how it goes, follow it. Now, Robert is a cop, technically being above security. He's fine with it. He understands that, these guys in uniform are just doing their job. We got to wait in line. We're no special than anyone else. Yesterday was the whole thing involving the media, so we got to be like everybody else. And he's even told that by the security officer. You're just like everybody else today. And Ray just keeps trying to getting around. And he even says a line at one point I had to write down to make this point. I'm not going to wait in line like everybody else. Well, Ray, here's the news. On a day like this, you are like everybody else. You're no different. No different. The whole Ray Barone of New York Newsday, I'm with the press. Oh, I drove 4 hours. That does not mean jack squat in the context of this situation. Get in line. And of course he ruins it because he has to get dragged out by security because of everything. He keeps trying to the point where Robert probably doesn't even want to wait in line. They never really fully stayed on it other than saying Ray got kicked out. But it could be one of those things that since he was with Ray, they decided to kick Robert out. Guilt by association. But it could also be since Ray was not going to go in, he decided to leave, and Robert's like, oh well, he's my ride, I'm going to go with him. And then this brings up the other little thing, and it's a good point that Robert makes when they're talking at the diner, is that you have to be humble. In a situation like this, you got to be humble. You don't just pull the cards to try to get what you want. Because 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to get what you want. You think you might, but you won't. That one time might be where a manager decides to go and comp you. No matter what the situation. This is not just for this. It's just in general. Manager might decide to comp you. Someone might decide to bend the rules even though you're technically violating some type of policy related with that place, or a casino, store, Hall of Fame. But the policies are in place for a reason. If they bend them for you, they got to bend them for someone else, and then it's like, why even have the policy? Ray doesn't seem to understand that. Robert does. Of course, he's a New York police sergeant. He's a supervisor, so of course he understands that concept. Being humble in a situation like this will go a lot more farther than being entitled. I don't believe the term existed back then, but if it did, people would be labeling Ray a male Karen in this episode, or Ken, I believe, is the term you usually use to denote it. He definitely was acting like one, so he deserved all of it. Now, later on, Robert does pull it a little bit too when they get pulled over by a cop, which you can kind of understand because it's such a minor infraction on the scale of things. I mean, Ray was pulling a 55 and a 40, which his initial thought of I'll just go with the flow of traffic. Ah, yeah. Tell that to the judge and see how far it gets, Ray. But him trying to get Ray out of the ticket by pulling the I'm a cop 2 thing, you can kind of understand. Just like you can kind of understand why the other cop is like, yeah, I'm not going to go with that. Could be a whole jurisdictional muscle flexing, which sad thing is when you research older cold cases, you usually run into that a lot. Especially when it's involving a multiple murderer, like one body's found here, one body's found there, one body here, and they're all flexing like, I found this body, I'm taking over. But it could also be a little bit from Robert pulling the old, I don't know how you do things out on the sticks, y'all. Which at that point is like Robert getting put in his place. And Ray gloats a little bit. It's a little funny, but still one of those things like, yeah, I'm siding with the other cop on this one. Because of how you decide to pull it. You could have just been like, alright. Especially following your whole be humble speech. Which of course by the end of this episode, both Barone brothers are humble. So basically, Plot decided to pull a Iron Sheik. Go to take the Boron boys, break the backs, and humble them. And they do end the episode on a high note. They start singing War by Edwin Starr, which is a song I always reference at work. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Nice little way to end the episode. There is a little bit of it in the blooper reel, show another take of it, which is fun. The Mets do try to pull the same card in a brief scene between the police scene and the war scene. And Shamsky's the one that goes up, and he gets told no cutting in line by the same guy from earlier. Which that one is really bad, because it's like, really, guys? You're in Cooperstown, you decide to go to a diner, and you're going to try to pull the whole card. Not gonna work. I mean, if the owner of the diner is a big fan and he decides to seat you like that independently, that's one thing. But trying to pull the same card, not really. Especially since one of them goes, "Do they know who we are?" It's like, oh yeah, like that's really gonna work in this case. And he got shot down like that. Like I said at the beginning, overall, from a technical standpoint, this episode's good. It's just, as a whole, it just doesn't click with me a lot. I mean, there's some chuckle-worthy stuff, but just all the entitlement from both Ray and a little bit from Robert later on, just going through it, it's just like, it gets X-Pac heat with me throughout the episode, where I'd rather just change the channel than continue to watch it. I mean, I even lowered the volume at one point, because I'm like, like the middle part of the scene with Ray trying to get his way, that scene dragged for me. That's how bad that scene was getting for me. Just seeing him being entitled. But even then I clapped a little bit when he got put in his place like he should have been. I mean, the best part of the whole episode, to be honest, is the scene in the diner where Ray gets told he has to be humble. And he doesn't want to eat wings without dipping sauce. It's like, if they're cooked correctly, you can still eat them without dipping sauce, Ray. And, of course, the opening scene. Quiet, Marie, I can't hear the punches. Brad and Ray do have a good amount to work with in the episode. And like I said, their acting is fine. It's just the substance of it just doesn't get it. Patricia Heaton, she's back fully. She's no longer pregnant in this episode. Peter Boyle and Doris Roberts, they only have a little bit to work with in that opening episode, just being parents. But it's fine for what it is. Just like I said at the top of this episode, this is still on the skip list for me. I mean, if it's one of your favorite episodes, power to you. If you'd like to explain in the comment section why it is, I'd love to hear it and see your rationale. It's just, it doesn't do anything for me. Now, the next episode is more like a breath of fresh air, because this is one I can get into. And it's a Ray and Deborah centered one involving their marriage and sleeping together. And I mean that in the non-dirty way.